Can you imagine your life being so terrible that drug addiction ends you up in prison? But imagine then that your addiction dictates that you have to carry on not only sourcing drugs in prison, but you've got to pay for it, deal with the drug dealers, but then also navigate the drug tests and the prison system and rules, because obviously drugs are against the rules in prison, but drugs are every bit as prevalent in prison as they are in the outside world. Sometimes it's more available in prisons than it is in the outside world. I know there was a story in the press about Ley Hill in Bristol. It's an open prison, and people from the outside were coming to the prison to score, essentially, because of the prevalence of drugs and drug dealers in prison. So it's more available in the prison for the local community than it was outside. Now, obviously, at some points when I was in prison, towards the later parts of my sentences, my last one especially, I was able to get drugs into the prison, a whole manner of ways, and then we were selling them, and for months on end in Exeter prison, I was smoking weed every night. It was amazing. It was lovely. Anything you can do to get yourself out of your headspace and out of your cell, essentially, through a drug in prison, is a commodity. And for me, my drug of choice has always been smoking weed. I enjoy cocaine and ecstasy. I'm old school, kind of 90s and 2000s drugs. When I was in prison, heroin was the kind of dirty drug that was kind of sweeping around the prison and was the scourge of the wings, really. It's dirty. Nobody really likes the fucking heroin dealers, and nobody really likes the fucking smackheads on the wing. Smackheads on the wing lead to fucking people stealing things off the week. You'll see people getting tobacco stolen out of cells, stereos get stolen, PlayStations go missing. This ends up with all sorts kicking off, and obviously, people spend a lot of money on these things, and then some dirty little crackhead goes and steals it out your cell. If you haven't got a whole bunch of people behind you to back you up, if you're just a good lad on the wing, people's computer games used to go missing all the time, because you can swap a computer game for fucking heroin's dealt out in 0.1s of a gram. So a computer game for fucking 0.1 of heroin is nothing. So people used to get themselves in real problems in prison. Imagine your life being that bad. Now, even down the block, you can get your hands on drugs, because normally the block, it's not always a separate area from the main wings. Sometimes, Dartmoor especially, the block is underneath the wing, so you can quite easily swing a line down and get stuff in. When we was on the resettlement wing in Dartmoor, they used to drug test us all the time, so it was one of the things I'd never bring in. I'd bring in everything else, porn, food, films, clothes, food, alcohol, all sorts of stuff, but I'd never bring drugs in, because first of all, if they started getting positive drug tests on the wing, then they would have shut the wing down for a period of time, and I had a great life outside of the prison, so I didn't want that. And also, if you get a positive piss test, then you get kicked off the wing. So I wasn't about to lose, my freedom for, a small amount of gain. So, yeah, my main time dealing drugs and selling drugs in prison, getting drugs in, was on one of my last sentences in Exeter. So I was with the Scousers. They were obviously drug dealers, and they could see an opportunity. They had a little firm with them of getting drugs down to Exeter, but they didn't really know of the methods of getting it in. So I had some local guys who were willing to come up to the prison and throw the drugs over, and then we would hook the bag and drag it up to the cell. So a couple of my pals would meet some of the Scousers and would get a bag that had been made up. In the bag would be phones, steroids, a small amount of cocaine. We had some weed in there as well, and they got some heroin to start dishing out to some of the little rats on the wing as well. One of my pals would come along and throw it over the wall, and then we'd get basically a line with a hook on it that would get the bag and would hook it up and pull it into the cell quickly. Now the wing did have cameras on it, so we'd have to do it but the camera was right down the other end of the wing. They had one camera basically looking out, so we would have to get a cell that was further down the wing to pull it all up and get it in. And we never actually got captured. We didn't get caught doing it. We did lose one bag because we couldn't hook it in, and that got taken. There was also a way around the back of the prison, because we were gym orderlies. We were able to once a week or so they sent us out to go and sweep the court in the summer. So we would go out there with brushes and sweep up all the shit that was out there on the court. So we would know regularly when we was going to be over there. And just as we went out there, something would come over the wall, and we'd grab it and put it down your boxer shorts quickly and hide it. We were trusted to an extent, so we were left out there on our own. And then other ways that not myself but other lads would get stuff into the prison would be through the local little shitbags, basically the little heroin addicts and fucking shop thieves, what do they call them, shoplifters, who come in and out of prison so regularly that they make it profitable for themselves. And what I mean by that is they'll be finishing up a 3-week sentence for getting caught shoplifting or something. They'll be going out on a Monday and they'll plan to come back in on a Thursday, with everyone's orders of what they want, and they'll shove it up their arse for you to come in. So people will order like an ounce of this, or fucking 10 pills, or something else, and these little crackheads would go out and intentionally get themselves caught and thrown straight back in prison. But they'd come in with an arse full of drugs and dish it out to the people on the wing. And this was something they would do quite regularly, because they'd only be coming in for little short sentences. They might only be in for a week or two, and then they'd get themselves thrown back in prison. And sell these drugs or pay off debts with these drugs that they'd hide up their arse, and it'll be a regular little income for them. Now, these little sheds, I used to like hanging around with them in Exeter, some of them, because they've got great stories. Crackheads and heroin addicts have got the best stories, because they live the most dysfunctional lives. And I remember this one guy in Exeter. He was a likeable little guy when he wasn't off his face, and he owed this heroin dealer some money. I don't even think it was a massive amount. It was probably only about 100 quid. And he spent ages ducking him and hiding. And he ended up getting the money, and eventually, because this guy was going to kill him, going around the flat and paying him back. And the heroin dealer sat him down and told him, how close he was to getting fucking smoked for the sake of 100 quid. And he went off to go and put the money in another room, and this little crackhead noticed that there was a bundle of cash on the table, and it was much more than the 100 quid that he dropped off. There was probably about 500-600 quid there. So he just grabbed it, shoved it in his pocket, and legged it out of the room. Now, this little fuck, that's exactly how they live their lives. They fucking they fucking set fire to bridges, while they're standing on them. These little morons, but they're entertaining to listen to. Now, if that fucking dealer gets hold of him again, he's fucking dead. And he'd solved his problem. He wasn't in any trouble, and then he makes it a whole 10 times worse for himself. That's the way they fucking live their lives. He's probably dead. Either he's probably dead or in jail now. Who knows? People in jail get pretty fucking desperate. A lot of people, when they come into prison, they'll tell the prison staff that they're withdrawing from heroin, just to get the kind of withdrawal medication. I don't know what they are. A lot of people will tell the staff they've got back pain and chronic pain and things like this, to be getting painkillers, any kind of medication they can try and squeeze out of the prison system. They'll do it, and they're pretty wise to what they can get without any questions being asked as well. So you'll see the queues of people going down there to the hospital bay, not the hospital bay, but the little nurses hatch, medication hatch every night, going to go and get their fucking withdrawal medication that either they are or they're not withdrawing from, but they just want to get them buzzed from it. I never really got into that kind of thing. I only really ever smoked weed in prison, but it is risky because once you start smoking weed on a regular basis, if you work your way up to enhanced, you get quite regular piss tests where they'll piss test you once a month or so. You can flush your system out. There's a lot of ways you can get around the test. So flushing your system out basically is just drinking 6-7 pints of water every morning. That way you just clear your system out of stale urine, and you're just pissing water all fucking day. So if they come and get you for a test, every time you banged up, just basically drink water. You'll be pissing all day, but basically your piss will be so clear that it's any small amount of drugs that you do get in prison will be out of your system. You can also, and one of the things I did used to do when I was first in prison, because I wasn't really taking any drugs, but I used to sell my piss, and that sounds pretty gross, but people who are smoking weed, like I say, they're always under the risk of getting caught. So what they would do is they would get a glove, and I would piss into the finger of the glove, and then you tie the glove up, so it's obviously secure in there, and then you tie the glove around the belt of your boxer shorts, or on a little string, tie it actually around yourself to make sure, because it's got to be warm as well. One of the stipulations on the test, not only does it test for drugs, but it tests the temperature to make sure you haven't got cold piss going in there that's obviously been pissed in by someone else and kept. So you got to keep that piss warm. So yeah, people would come and buy piss off me because my piss was clean, and I would make a bit of a living in the early days. Now, like I say, if you can't beat the test, then you can end up getting thrown off the wing. You get thrown off enhanced. You might get a bit moved down to basic if you get caught with drugs in prison. One of the most desperate things I ever saw or ever heard about was, and a guy, I knew him quite well. He was quite a large guy. He must have been 20 stone plus. He ended up getting some heroin in, and he ended up overdosing, because the real problem you have in prison is that people's tolerances go down so much. You hear of so many people getting out of prison and dying within the first week or two because they do too much, and they end up ODing, and it might have been the normal amount that they would normally do when they were out and about, but after 6 months in prison or a year in prison, when you get out and try and hit that needle again, they end up ODing. So this lad in prison, he was, like I say, he'd been kicked off the resettlement wing, but he'd managed to get some heroin in somehow, and he was on the main wing. Some other lads had found out that he'd got some gear, and I think he'd sold some, but he did too much, and he ended up ODing, and he died in the cell. And his cellmate searched his body for the other raps that he knew he had. Couldn't find them, searched everywhere in the cell, searched his property, couldn't find them, and then resorted to pulling his fucking trousers down, getting into his boxers, and searched his fucking ass crack. Didn't find anything, so he penetrated him. He searched up his fucking ass, and then he found the fucking wraps that he'd been looking for up this fucking dead man's ass. Probably still warm, still newly dead. OD'd, fucking friend of mine. It's fucking savage what these rats will do, man, to get the fucking drugs. But yeah, that's what he was led to do. Like I say, imagine being so desperate that your fucking addiction ends you up in jail, and then you end up searching in the fucking ass of a dead man for the drugs that you fucking crave. One way or the other, he was either addicted or he was so greedy that he knew he could make money from the fucking raps. But imagine being that fucking desperate that you do that. Sometimes you can get the staff to bring the drugs in for you. That's another way of getting stuff into the prison. Now, obviously, it's a risky old business approaching staff about this. Now, the only way that I've heard has been successful, in my experience, is obviously, you befriend a member of staff, you start to exploit the ones who possibly are new a bit green around the ears. You know, obviously local staff that are, you know, got some kind of connection to you in some way. But what you'll find is there'll always be some member of staff that, you know, don't really want to be there, hate their job, you know, thinking about changing their career anyway. And you just kind of say to them, you know, what would it cost for you to bring something in for me? You know, we're just talking about small things to start with. No, it's like you're grooming them, really. So you just talk about maybe some music, or some computer games, or some films, something like that, some porn maybe, you know, something that you can't get hold of on the wing. Maybe even a book, something like that, you know, something that is difficult to get hold of, and, you know, would just make your life a little bit easier. And they might do it for you. And if you do, you know, you reward them. You get your girlfriend to drop them off some money or transfer it or something like that. And then it gets to something a bit more, you know, it's better if you have something on the staff as well. So, you know, if you can record them picking up the stuff, or, you know, get some sort of communication, you know, something to have them. If they decide that they don't want to do it anymore, and they need to persuade him to carry on doing it, then, you know, maybe just have something on them that can keep them motivated to doing it when they possibly don't want to do it anymore. But obviously, you know, there's a lot of member staff in there who will make a lot of money from bringing things in, bringing items in, you know, bringing drugs in. When they get caught, obviously, it happens a lot, happens often. The staff will get searched by security on their way in, as well as the prisoners going out and staff, visitors coming in and stuff like that. So, you know, it runs a risk for them. You know, they'll quite often get caught bringing shit in. But the stuff that we never really had anything to do with, it wasn't really around at my time, was this spice, this fucking horrible shit. It's they call it synthetic fucking weed. It's got nothing to do with that. It's chemicals sprayed on some sort of herb or whatever they can, you know, synthetically get to spray this chemical on, and then you burn it, and it turns people into this kind of zombie. You see them laid out, haven't got a fucking clue. You see homeless people in my town centre just zombified, fucking haven't got a clue what they're doing. They can end up, you know, going into these kind of holes almost, a bit like a K-hole for ketamine, where they're just zonked out. You know, and when you're in prison, you know, and you're an addict, you know, it's an easy drug to get hold of. You know, the drug dealers seem to be able to get it in quite easily these days, and you can get it in quite large amounts, you know, off the dark web. So it's, you know, if you've got a supply and a bit of a network now, there's easy money can be made from spice, because your addicts will pay good money to get fucked up. So yeah, that every drug you can think of outside is in different amounts in prison. Obviously, they're always after you. They're always trying to stop you. But there's ways and means all the time. Like I say, for several months, I was smoking weed every day. You know, in different quantities, in hash or you know, in green. And we had a jolly good time. I managed to get some LSD in once. If you've listened to my diary podcast, you'll hear about that. But it's yeah, my brother got some LSD on the back of an envelope, and you know, I broke off a small section of it and took it in the evening, not realising that LSD was a stimulant, so it ended up keeping me awake till about 4 or 5 in the morning. But yeah, it was a trip and a half for about 6-7 hours. But I was just like tripping balls, and it was absolutely fantastic. Other than that, it was just weed, some small amounts of cocaine. Never really did any pills in prison. But yeah, everything you can imagine in prison is there if you need it or want it. You can get yourself in some big trouble. One of the good things about me being a gym orderly when I was in Exeter was I got to go to all the different parts of the prison, even the nonces wing. So when you're a debtor in prison, you'd find a lot of people would get heroin on tick, and then run out. You know, they'd even borrow the fucking tobacco to pay them back, and then you'd go to their cell in the morning and they'd just be gone. And you know, they'd been ghosted off. They'd say to the staff that they're being bullied, and they'd give a load of information. They may even grass up the guy selling heroin, and they'd get ghosted off to the nonces wing, because it's not any nonces on that wing. It's vulnerable prisoners, essentially. So you'll have grasses on there, people who can't handle, the real wings. You can always get yourself put down there. But essentially, it's just sex offenders, paedophiles, and fucking grasses, and your debtors as well. But where I was a gym orderly, I'd have to go down to the nonces wing to go and take them for gym sessions, same as everybody else. So I'd always have a hand in being able to collect anything from people that were down there. Just turning up at their cell was normally enough to prompt them to start paying something back. So my reach was always long in prison. You could never really get away from me. So yeah, that was it. Basically, drugs in prison. You can get them in many ways. You can get them with drones now, I suppose, as well. I saw in Guy's Marsh, a prison that I've been to, they were getting them thrown over the wall in dead rats, stuffing the rat full of drugs and throwing it over the wall, knowing that the sort of cleaners would be the one going around picking up the rats and getting them put into the parcels, into the sort of bin bags there. One time, obviously, I've heard of fish hooks being used in football socks. So you fill up a football sock full of all the drugs you can think of, drugs, phones, because they stretch quite a lot, and fill it up and throw it over the wall, and then easily a little kit bag can be thrown down and it attaches to the fish hooks, and then it can be pulled up into the cell. The only problem with that is obviously when you're trying to throw the football sock full of drugs over the wall, you end up getting the fish hooks stuck in you everywhere. So obviously swinging it back behind you, the fish hooks will get stuck in your back and your arm and your shoulders and everything, and then trying to get over the wall with a bit of a mission from the other side. I've heard, I don't know from experience, but so I've heard, it can be a bit tricky. So yeah, thanks again for listening. I know when it gets to the end of this is only the true fans that are still here. So thank you very much for taking the time out of your day to listen to me ramble on about prison. I will be doing more of these. I am working on some sort of book to throw together for more in depth of my prison diary. So look out for that coming out in the next month or two. Hopefully get some sort of ebook out there for everybody. So keep subscribing. At some point we're going to do to give away some t-shirts. So if you subscribe, you've got a chance of being picked at random to win some exclusive t-shirts that I'm going to design, and we're going to give away to the good people who keep following this podcast and making me want to do more. All right, so peace out. I love you all. See you soon. Cheers.